Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Today's guest is Purvis Taylor III. He has a Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology. He is an award winning celebrity life coach, speaker, and best selling author of Purvis Principles Volumes 1 and 2 and Single Man, Married Man. As a result of his own trauma, Purvis has dedicated his life to the betterment of one's mental and emotional growth. Through his honing methods, he continues to transform the lives of his extensive client roster that reaches both celebrities, executives, organizations, and most importantly, inner city youth by pinpointing their needs and goals. Moreover, he helps facilitate the process to unearthing the greatness and destiny that's inside of us all. What is most near and dear to his heart is helping men to become healthy emotionally and mentally. The passion to help men cultivate and develop their EQ or emotional intelligence inspired his creation of Surthrival Mode, his new book. It is designed for men and has a poignant and personal look into the heart, emotions, and mind. Purvis has bachelor's in marketing from University of Miami and his master's in clinical psychology from Columbia University. He currently resides in Brooklyn. Help me welcome Pervis Taylor III. I'm here with Pervis Taylor, who is a licensed clinical. Now, there's so many different names. Are you a licensed clinical? Like what are you going by?
I'm not licensed, but I just I'm somebody who has their master's in clinical psychology, so I kind of use that as a hybrid with my coaching.
I love it. And it's, you know what,
Yeah.
let me tell you something, because I've gotten into coaching also. And the reason why I pivoted from counseling to coaching is because it gives me more latitude, freedom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To do the things that, because, what people are dealing with today, you got to be out the box. It's just
Absolutely.
So what's your modality, or like what's your specificity?
That's a good question. So currently I have clients from all walks of life. So I have, celebrity, I have some NFL players, I have some executives and everyday people. But I would say my specialty has been in working with men of color and teaching them how to process and navigate through their emotions.
Man, we need that right now. I just cried for like an hour yesterday with
That's
all
awesome.
this. My cousin called me, man, and he's like talking about like he has a gun now and just not feeling safe. And then he has his Google alert set to black man killed. And I was just
Gosh.
man, the weight of it,
Yeah.
But on the flip side, journaling helped me process my emotions. I just sat down at my computer. I have an online journal that I use. I use Penzu, and this is not an advertisement for them. But I just sat and just wrote out all the things I was feeling and thinking, and some of it was about the protests, and some of it was about COVID. But it was just all, I just set a time for 20 minutes and just went all in, and just flooded the page with whatever was going on.
That's excellent. I recommend narrative therapy to a lot of men because, sometimes men aren't comfortable with actually verbalizing. But I feel like narrative therapy is verbalizing. Even though it's not audible, it's still coming from within them. And that's all. My biggest hope is to bring what's on the inside to the outside, however which way that comes about. I'm not married to either which way. So if it's through journaling, if it's through making music, rapping, if it's through, interpretive dance, whatever that is, we need that to come to the outside and not on the inside. So, the battle is always inside. So we don't want that battle to be happening.
Now, when you talk about narrative therapy and journaling, can you what does that look like in terms of using dance? What does it look like using music? And can you give us examples of how somebody could incorporate that?
So one young man that I worked with at a school here, a college here in New York City, he was struggling with forgiveness. And we had this whole, we did this whole session on forgiveness and why forgiveness is important, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, Purvis, would you mind if I use music as a medium? Because I always have them do a project at the end of our sessions. And his project was he wanted to make a song. And he made a song dedicated to his mom because I think his mom abandoned him when he was a child, due to, I think, her being on drugs or whatever. And he was, he had this anger against her for so long. And so he made this whole beautiful song about how he was angry at God and he asked God for forgiveness and he asked his mom for forgiveness for being so mean to her. So it was very powerful. And he had never done that before. So.
Man, music heals. I was just listening to Marvin Gaye yesterday, and he had, when I think about Marvin Gaye, I think about Let's Get It On, but he also had songs about
conscious.
He was very socially conscious, and he had songs about the economy and pollution. And I was like, oh, whoa, like this brother was deep, man. He really had a message in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think about, Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation. Some artists do make Stevie Wonder. A lot of artists back in the day used to make socially conscious records. We have Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole today, but definitely it was much more prevalent back in the day.
Yeah, what is it about men that why is it harder for us to seek out counseling and seek help than women, or do we seek it out in different ways?
Well, I definitely think that we've been socialized into the culture, machismo, like, suck it up, be a man, keep it moving, and not realizing that those emotions don't die. Those things that we feel, they don't die, they just transform. And for a lot of us, they've been showing up in ways that we can't manage anymore. And so now it's like a 911, especially with men of color in terms of their mental health and emotional health. I think that a lot of times we don't have the tools. We've never seen it modeled. So if you did have a father, more than likely he probably didn't emote. More than likely you didn't see him process his emotions in a healthy way. And so it's difficult to be something that you never seen before.
So if we haven't seen that modeled, what are we seeing modeled in terms of emotions? Like what are we witnessing that we're carrying on that might be maladaptive for us?
Suppression, ignoring, acting like the emotion isn't there or the pain isn't there. You're seeing a lot of, toxic masculinity, which is been like the buzzword for the last few years. But, a lot of men, aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of men being sexually promiscuous, just a lot of things, just really being caught up in achievement. How much output I make this much money. My car looks better than yours. A lot of comparison, a lot of flexing. But I think now the tide is slowly turning where you're starting to see Black men become more communal and become more vulnerable in spaces. Especially, since I've been doing this for 10 years, I've definitely seen the tide turn a lot significantly.
Yeah, there's a lot of different men's groups. You see guys coming together, sharing more. In Europe and in Africa, men hold hands, they hug, they kiss on the cheek. So you see that slowly starting to matriculate over here to the United States. And you're right. It's like, because I grew up suppressing my emotions also. And you can only suppress something for so long before it pops up as promiscuity or it pops up as aggression or overachievement. I see that not just in myself, but in my other friends. For people out there who aren't seeing it modeled, how could they, if they're still young and moldable, how do we get that if we're not getting it at home?
Well, the one thing that I talk about in my personal narrative, I was, molested as a child. I was bullied and I dealt with low self-esteem and I dealt with worth and I dealt with emasculation, being emasculated, by girls that I went to school with and guys. And my father necessarily, he's a great man, but he wasn't the most emotionally intelligent man. And so one of the things that I had to do was I had to live in my imagination. I had to envision the person that I wanted to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it. I had to clearly see that there was going to be another side to this. So, there's a guy by the name of Viktor Frankl who is he created what is known as logotherapy, and he developed that while he was in a concentration camp as a Jewish man. So seeing people die around him, seeing all this, death around him, and he posed this thought that if you can see your way out of a situation, you will make your way out of that situation. And so for me, I had to engage in my imagination like never before. I had to envision the life that I wanted to create, and that was the beginning for me. And so I encourage young men of all ages, to dream, to not let what's happening around you stop you from dreaming, because you are still possible. You are your ancestors', greatest reward. So you have everything within you to be that person that you want to be. I'm just here to highlight that for you. I always tell young men that no one is born ill-equipped. They're just born ill-informed. And so everybody has the tools that they need to make their life dynamic and great. And so that's my job, is to highlight that for them.
Now, do you have a process for helping people discover the tools that they have?
I necessarily don't, people aren't monolithic. But if somebody, and this as a coach, we have to really engage in our intuition a lot. So I engage in intuition a lot when I'm talking to somebody. I was like, oh, they struggle with shame, or they struggle with their masculinity, or they struggle with identity. They struggle with, it's just something that comes up for me. And I just tend to hone into that space and really correct that damage that's been done because of that belief. That, I guess, that would be the process, is finding out what it is that they're believing, the hidden belief, and dismantle that.
Yeah. I mean, shame is a thing that comes up, I think, for a lot of people. Shame, guilt, especially as I feel like for Black men specifically, but people in general who have made it out of a situation. I know for myself, I grew up in like a middle class, maybe a little lower middle class. We grew up in a Section 8 building, and then, going to college, getting my master's. So, and by all means, I made it out. However, there's a guilt of, man, I left some people behind, or why did I make it out? And why didn't my other boys make it out? And so there's that guilt that you carry around. And then there's a shame about who you are, and that imposter syndrome of, I made it out.
Yes.
Will they find out that I grew up in a Section 8 with roaches, that whole thing. Can you talk to us about how you help people deal with shame?
Well, the first thing is that, shame isn't, it tries to disguise itself as an identity. So saying that you're an imposter, like that thing, right? It's tied to identity. So the first thing I do is like, shame isn't your identity. You have to break apart what the thing is. So for instance, for me, the shame I had was being molested or being bullied. But the reason why I had shame was because I took it on as an identity. I didn't understand that was something that happened to me. That's something that I experienced, but it's not who I am. So it's about really breaking down, distinguishing between who you are and what happened to you, because those are two separate things. And a lot of times people equate the two. And my job is, again, to dismantle that narrative that you're telling yourself that that's who you are. No, that's something that you've experienced. And then unpack it even further. Why do you feel shame for leaving the projects? Why do you feel shame for choosing better for you? You know what I mean? So it's really about unpacking that even further.
Wow. Yeah. I think for me, it was, I attribute part of it to luck. And I read somewhere that, people who struggle with depression and mental health issues attribute a lot of their success to luck, and then their failures to their character. And I realized that in myself, and that if I make it, if I move 10 steps forward, I'm like, wow, I really got lucky. If I fall 5 steps back, I'm like, oh, well, of course I deserve that. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so to try to be more aware of catching those thoughts and those moments of what I'm attributing my success to.
And that's the thing, is like, For all of my clients, not even just men that I work with, all of my clients, you have to build your life on a positive foundation, because the brain is wired for negativity, neuroscience wise. Which is why it's easier for you to recall a negative memory quicker than a positive one, because the brain is conditioned to hold on to negative things. And so you have to ingrain, that's why they call it positive reinforcement. You have to ingrain in your mind, your subconscious, something positive about you. So when things happen, like, your default isn't, oh, I deserve that. Your default is, I'm still amazing, regardless. You know what I mean? And so it's like literally reprogramming the way you think about yourself.
I mean, that's why that self-talk is so important. I've been so big on
Absolutely.
that. And do you do self-talk?
Oh, yeah.
I lost you. Hello?
Of like famous people or people who have money who can't name 5 positive
Hey,
things about them.
Purvis, my bad, man. The sound cut out for like 2 seconds. I'm going to ask you the question again, and then we'll go back into it. I do self-talk. Do you do self-talk? And what does that sound like? Hello?
What's interesting is in working with, hello?
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 Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Hello? I heard something go out. Yeah. Can you
Oh
hear
yeah,
me?
something. Yeah, the internet connections got real spotty. All right, I'm going to
Oh,
ask
I'm
you the
so
question.
sorry.
No, it's all good because we're still recording.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the question
Yeah.
again, and then we'll just take it from there.
Okay,
So
cool.
I do self talk, and I'm sure that you do self talk also. How do you use it, and what does it sound like?
Self-talk for me is like telling myself every day 5 things that I think are amazing about me. And I say it to myself in the mirror, and I give myself a hug. And it's so necessary, because my voice is always going to be the loudest out of everyone else's. And at the end of the day, I have to be on my team. A lot of times we don't recognize that we are against ourselves. And they say a house divided will fall. So how can I be divided within myself? I have to be on my own team. And I do the same thing with clients. And to be honest with you, you'd be amazed at how many celebrities or even people with a lot of money who can't name 5 things that they found amazing about themselves. So self-talk is so important.
And when you talk about your childhood, just to go back into that a little bit, I'm sure you struggled with depression, and
Mm-hmm.
were there any thoughts of suicide that came along with that?
Absolutely.
And how did you? Can you walk us through what you're envisioning look like, and visualizing yourself out of it, and then what other coping skills you use to move your way through?
Well, I remember one night specifically, I was like, yo, I'm just going to end my life. I'm going to take these pills. And I remember praying to God, and I was just like, Lord, please show me something. Give me a sign, something that I'm going to make it, that I'm going to be okay. And I ended up getting a scholarship to University of Miami. It literally came like that day or the next day, something. It was very close. It's very, very close proximity. And to me, I took that as a sign, like, okay, so there's a future for you. There's a future for you. But, I think, again, the journaling, because I used to journal a lot when I was much younger, and really just the envisioning, like, that night where I thought I was going to take all those pills, something interrupted me and said, hold on. There's something inside of me that said, hold on, not now, not now. And I just kind of trusted that voice. And I remember just thinking, like, if I can make it through that night, in Buddhism, they call it the dark night of the soul. And I've had several dark nights of the soul where you think that you're not going to be able to make it through, but I made it through that night. And when I made it through that first time, the dark night of the soul, I said, okay, there's a future for me. And things started to get a little bit better for me after that.
Did you ever go to therapy, or
I
was there
see a
anything
therapist
else around?
regularly now.
Mm.
I see a therapist regularly now, but at the time I didn't know that therapy was a thing. I'm from the South. I'm a black man from the South. What is therapy? So I didn't even know the importance of the necessity of therapy at that time.
I want to go into, because I realize that it's so easy to say do this, don't do that, and I always
Mm-hmm.
believe that there's a place for everything. And I want to backtrack a little bit in terms of suppressing emotions. When is it healthy and beneficial to suppress your emotions? Because we developed that for a reason. What's the space for that, and or how does it serve us?
Well, did you see the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN?
Man, not yet, not yet. I want to watch
Okay,
it.
so his father died, and it was Father's Day weekend. His father had died that year, and his Father's Day weekend, and they were playing the championship. And obviously, it was very rough for him because his father just died, and his father wasn't there, for the playoffs like he always was previously. And he made it through that game. He won, and when he went to the locker room, he literally broke down crying, heaving, out of control. And he just kept clutching the ball. He was literally like a baby in a fetal position. And I would say in that moment, that delayed gratification served him because he was able to achieve the thing that he wanted, but he still got the release that his body needed. And so I would say in certain situations, you have to put on your game face, but still honor that emotion when it's done. It's been plenty of times I've given speeches, I've had to teach, I've had to give lectures, and I was in pain. And I had to hold off that emotion until afterwards. And when I got home, I cried.
Mm. You talk about being in pain, and because how old are you now?
39.
39. So as much as you've worked through it, I know there's still residue from your
Yes.
history. Uh, how has that affected? Are you in a relationship now?
No, I'm not. So many people trying to get me married though, but I'm not in a relationship now.
Oh yeah, especially out there at Brooklyn and New York for sure.
Yeah.
How has it affected how you show up to relationships? I would imagine trust is a major issue.
Trust and vulnerability. Because, everybody's not me. Like, people have told me the craziest things. Like, I've had adult entertainers as clients. I've had people who say that they ventured into incest when they were younger and had no judgment for them. And so I recognize that everybody's not me. And so I have a fear of not being received fully in relationships.
Can you not being? I completely understand that. The Because we have a range of emotions, and like you said, as men, we are expected, or really, at least there's a feeling that we should show up a certain way, financially, physically, and
Yes.
I was at lunch like a couple weeks ago, and what if my girlfriend's friend, or
Mm-hmm.
acquaintance, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, "I don't understand why black men are crying." She's Russian, and
Wow.
that floored me because the the basis of a relationship is to show up 100% and to be truthful. And being truthful doesn't mean just telling you about everything I did today, or who that phone call is from. Being truthful is also being truthful about how I feel in this very moment. And sometimes I feel like crying, or I feel scared. And if I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I can't express that to you, then you're not prepared for all of me. You just want the serious me, or the provider me, or the protector me, and not the vulnerable me, and the scared me, and the goofy me. So I
Mm-hmm.
get that. I completely understand.
And that's the problem is that, the world doesn't embrace black men as humans. And the thing is, we black men rarely get to be our full selves. And we've even done it to ourselves. We siphoned off a part of who we are to survive in this world. And that's the thing is, like, I'm a black man. I'm very verbal, which is kind of uncommon. I like R&B music. I like to dance. I like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not, I guess, the typical, what people would typify as a black man, but I honor my whole human experience. And if I can't be with somebody who can embrace me as a human, as a full human being, I don't necessarily want to be with them.
Man, I completely understand. That's so tough. But I'm excited. You wrote a book called The Survival Mode. Or
Thrival.
Sir Thrive. You know
Yes,
what's
sir.
funny? I read it a million times, and you know how your brain just fills in the gaps. That's
Yes.
exactly what happened. The Thrival Mode, and it's basically the 4 A's of survival. Can you go
Yes.
through those with us? Talk about the first A, which is acknowledgement.
So I always say, like, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most successful recovery program in history because they engage in the principle of always acknowledging that a problem exists. So every time you go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, my name is Purvis, blah, 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 and I am an alcoholic. So there's power and profundity in acknowledgement of a thing. And I think for a lot of us, we don't acknowledge, especially men, we don't acknowledge that we have an issue or that there's some pain going on. So that's the first step, acknowledging that something is not working. Then the next step after that is acceptance, which is really, really hard because acceptance almost feels like we're conceding or we're agreeing with what happened. And no, it's not that. It's just saying that it did happen. It's just embracing the fact that something happened, whether we liked it or not. So for me, being molested, I didn't agree with it, but it's something that happened. And now I have to accept that and be responsible for how my life proceeds afterwards. Right. And that's the hard part is like, even though I was victimized, I get to choose, do I want to remain a victim or do I want to be a victor? So that's the acceptance part, right? Just accepting that something happened. Then going to articulation, where you start to articulate what has happened, how this has affected your life. Because in therapy, and you know this as a coach, your healing is in your words, also your actions, but healing is also in your words. Words are powerful, words are spirits. And especially for men of color, on average, women speak 30,000 words a day, and on average, men speak 10,000 words a day. So there's a 20,000 word gap in processing. And the reason why women are able to heal quicker is because they are in tune with the power of articulation, sharing, being able to contextualize their experiences. And that's also the thing, too, about articulation, being able to expand your emotional lexicon, being able to really, really state, like, what is happening, what's the framework, what's this world like for you. And I encourage men to be so descriptive as possible, like to use sensory language, to use descriptive language, because that further can bring healing to the situation.
Can you give us
And
an
lastly,
example of the sensory descriptive language?
so for instance, like, how you can say like, babe, I had a bad day, right? That suffices, right? In your mind, I had a bad day. Sensory language is, babe, I feel like I got hit by a Mack truck. That's sensory, because that's like this feeling of getting hit and being overtaken by something. That simple thing changes the conversation, the context of the conversation, from I had a bad day to, babe, I just feel like I got hit by a Mack truck. I feel like my world is caving in. That's, again, things that you can relate to.
Yo,
Sensory wise.
that, you know what, that makes sense because me and my girl were just having a conversation, and I thought I was communicating how I felt about certain things, and I was like, I feel a little uneasy, I felt a little uncomfortable, unsettled, but to say I felt like I was like it was Pearl Harbor, like I was attacked from all angles, like I didn't even see it coming, like it was. I felt like a SWAT team kicked in the door, while I was sleeping,
Yeah.
like that kind of visceral
Visceral.
yeah. And as you start to talk about it more, you start to feel it in your blood, and you start to connect with it versus, and I think that, and I'm glad you brought this up because I'm realizing that typically when I think about expressing emotions is like, oh, I feel sad, I feel hurt, but like to be like, wow, I felt like I was just sitting on the steps waiting for my father to come home. You know what I'm saying?
Ooh.
And just,
Ooh,
just
and I
something
feel
like,
that,
yeah,
and I
right.
felt that just now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like that whole thing, and to paint the picture of really what's going on. And I think that we have gotten caught up in the stats and the specificities rather than the imagery and the sensory
Hmm.
uh, like what does it feel like versus what it actually is,
And what
you
does it
know.
taste like? What
Yeah.
does it smell like? And that's the thing. That's what made Martin Luther King Jr. a great orator, is because he was so excellent in sensory language. If you look at his "I Have a Dream" speech, it's full of sensory language. And that's the thing, that it builds further connection between you and your spouse and you and your therapist or whoever it is that you are talking to at the time. It builds a greater connection, a deeper connection.
Man, when I so to piggyback on that, two things. One, I realize that's why Oprah is such a great interviewer,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
she knows how to emotionally charge her questions and paint a visceral picture, so that whether you are an intellectual or not, you get it. Like she's giving
Hmm.
you both the Nabokov and the Dr. Seuss version of what's
Hmm.
happening, right?
At the same
At the
time.
same time. And then what was it? Oh, so like when me and my girl, we have some discourse or anybody,
Right.
I used to be like, oh, that hurt or whatever. Now I say, you know what? That just put some space between us, and
Mm.
people get that, like, whoa.
Mm.
And then they go like, oh, okay, like how much space, and you can articulate that. So that's another way that I found I'm more comfortable saying that with versus like, I feel a little hurt, like that doesn't make me feel strong, but to say, yo, that puts space between us, like immediately people get that, and you could see them like, whoa. And then
Because they connected that so fast, because hurt could be, you could just be overly sensitive in their mind. But when
right.
you give them that sensory, when you give them that descriptor, they're like, oh gosh, they can actually see it. You can see the space in saying that created a space between us. You can actually see that.
Right, especially now with the COVID, everybody's aware of
Mm-hmm.
six.
Mm-hmm. Man, listen.
So what's this last A?
So
The alchemy.
alchemy. Yeah, alchemy is, alchemy at its basic core is turning lead into gold. And so what I propose is, how do you turn the lead in your life into gold? How did I turn, being molested, father died of a heroin overdose, being homeless? How did I turn all these things into now, I was a person who was emasculated, that I empower men in their masculinity all the time. How did I do that? And that's the thing, is we all have the transformative powers to do that. We all have the power to transform our narrative into something greater than what it was.
And so how do we break that down? Is it through journaling? How do we retell that? How do we change that storyline for us?
Well, I definitely think the biggest thing is about letting go of shame. We talked about that earlier. And also, understanding the power of, yo, I made it through this, as opposed to, I was victimized by this. Yo, I made it through this. I'm thriving even in spite of. I'm not a survivor. I'm a thriver. I'm a thriver. You know, um, really just flipping and rebranding our relationships with certain things in our lives. Like, so for me, it's not, oh, wow, Purvis was molested. It was like, wow, Purvis is thriving even in spite of being molested. You get what
So
I'm saying?
yeah.
So it's like, it's about redirecting.
So how are you peeling back the layers so that what's your practice for showing up more fully in a relationship? How are you? What's your blueprint for working through that?
Um, Showing up in a relationship, I always, for me personally, I show up as myself always. And I do that purposely because I don't want to have a representative. I don't want you to fall in love with Purvis, the life coach. I don't want you to fall in love with Purvis, the guy who can charm the pants off of you. I want you to love Purvis who he is, because Purvis is very complex as a human being. And I hate that I just spoke of myself in third person. I apologize for that.
No,
But
no, I do it all the time, brother. It makes me
yeah,
feel
yeah,
good. It feeds the ego a little bit.
yeah. So for me, it's just like, I, I I tend to lay all of my stuff out there as fast as I can, because you need to know this. I'd rather you find out about it now than, it's always better to tell than to be found out.
Absolutely.
So, you know what I mean? So, she has to be really mature, because I've been through a lot and I've experienced a lot. And I'm so much more than just the person that people see on TV or writes books or speaks and, all those things like that. It's so much more.
When you thought about ending your life, what was the prevailing thought? That what was the through line? What was the voice?
That made me want to.
Yeah.
I just felt so rejected because I never was masculine enough. I was never my friends. I was never them. I was, I honestly, I tell people laugh at me all the time. I was like, yo, women didn't start liking me till I turned 30. I swear to God. I mean, I've had girlfriends before then, but like where it was like, yo, this dude is fine. That didn't happen till 30. And so I always was underdeveloped. I was always small. If you saw me in college at University of Miami, of all places, I was underdeveloped. And here I am at this school full of like, built football players, well-developed women. And I'm like this scrawny thing. So I always felt like I didn't belong or I was like a manufacturer's defect, So it was just like, I just felt rejected. I would like a girl and she would just play me. And it was more than, rejection is the most powerful thing ever. And I guess just feeling rejected and not fitting in, that was like the thing is like, like God made a mistake in creating me. That's what it felt like.
And so there's the inner work of self-talk and saying that you're enough and that you have the tools and that, you're not a rejection. What were some of the outer work stuff that you've done? And the reason why I bring this up is I'm quarantined here in San Diego right now, but I live in LA, and so I'm in a different place, new people, new neighborhood, and so I feel disconnected. I feel isolated because I don't really know anybody. I don't have a group of people, and so what I've been doing. There's the inner work of, the journaling, the meditation, but the outer work that I've started to do is eat my breakfast and sometimes my dinner on the stairs in front of my house. And so because people are walking by and so it's a way for me to just visibly introduce myself. And for the first couple of weeks, people will walk by and nobody said anything. And then literally just today, 4 people waved and said hello. And these are people who had just been walking by. And so I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt a bit more connected. And I was like, oh, okay. So now it makes me want to sit out there even more, And so I wonder if so my question is to you is like, you felt disconnected. You're comparing yourself to the jocks and what everybody else has. What were the actionable steps that you took when you to build your power and to be seen, heard, and understood?
It's funny because I often think about that. For me, I was like, Purvis, what changed? And one of the things is that I've always been a good dancer. So that was the one thing I always had going for me. I could dance. Like I could do a Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson choreographed routine like that. So I found that one piece that I liked about myself. I always look younger than everybody else. So everybody who I went to school with, they're turning 40. I turn 40 next month. I don't look like I'm 40. They look like they're 40. So I started to embrace the little things like, Purvis, you still look youthful. And you have this girl, I'll never forget this. This was a turning point. I remember now. I was in college and I'll never forget. I was doing a group project and this girl said to me, she said, Purvis, you have a beautiful smile. And for the longest, I was afraid to smile because, Black men in particular, we don't smile in pictures. We make that mean mug face. Right. And so my smile, I started smiling from that day forth, and that's become my signature thing is smiling. And so even in the streets of Brooklyn, the mean streets of New York, rough streets, I smile all the time. To your point, what you said, you went outside to go eat on the stairs. I've been going to the park to work out. And, I've been making small talk with people, like just feeling that connection again. But I more understood my power, if that makes sense. Like, not necessarily confidence, but power, because confidence is like usually contingent upon a thing, and power is regardless. So I found that I have power. So whether that, whatever that power is used for, I know that I have it. And so slowly over time, I started to embrace these things about myself that I like. I like that, I have a great patch in my hair. I like that, you know, I like my smile. I like my walk. I like how I make people feel. So I just slowly started piecing together things about myself that I liked. And that just kind of helped me to kind of fortify myself.
Man, I'm so glad you brought that up because I struggle with the love handles, right?
Bro, me
Like,
too.
man, like my arms stay thin, the legs always right, but right that I get I eat half a donut and bam, it just explodes around the mid waist, and so when I look in the mirror, I noticed that I'm always looking at that one area. And
Yeah,
then but my whole life I've been told I have beautiful eyes, amazing complexion, great hands, like all these other
me
things
too.
that people have complimented me on that I'm completely walking right by. Right? That's just
Yeah,
what like I'm walking all right by all the good things and I'm going right to this one area and I'm like, what, but what's going on with this? And
yeah,
and so now when I brush my teeth, I've been focusing on looking myself in the eye. Man, it's so hard. I didn't realize
yeah,
how hard looking yourself in the eye is. My
yeah.
God.
That's why women, you see those not women, just people in general, when you see those makeover shows, they start crying because they've never seen themselves before.
Wow.
Like they disconnected from themselves so many years prior, and now they're getting reacquainted with who they are. And that can be shocking. It can be overwhelming when you haven't really had to deal with you for a long time.
You know, when we talk about mental health, it's like you said, so much of it starts in our youth, and
Hmm.
my sister and there's a lot of women out there who are raising men, who are raising young boys to be men, and
Hmm.
how do they? What do you have any advice for the mothers, the single moms out there who are raising boys of how to teach them mental health, or what should they say versus what they don't say? What's been the experiences?
I would say for young men, ask open-ended questions. Um, and I also would add, give them time to process. So like when you want to talk about something, let them know what you want to talk about and ask them when they would like to talk about it, to give them time to process, because men don't process the same way as women do. That's proven. And, those simple things can like make a difference. Don't demand an answer in that moment.
Now,
Because a man can, women can speak past, present, and future in one conversation. And we just stuck off one thing that they said, not hearing anything else that they said. It's not, it's not shade. It's just, that's what we heard. You know what I mean? Like we just got stuck on that one thing. And so like being able to give us time to process, ask open-ended questions, um, understand that, male-centric emotions are different than yours and that they take a while for them to manifest and be processed through.
can you give us like two examples of an open ended question that the son is upset, he's angry about something at school, but you don't know what it is, and so what are some examples of open ended questions that parents can ask?
Um, so I can take this from one of my couples clients. She asked him, um, why did you not pick that rug? So they were having this argument over a rug. Why did you pick that rug? As opposed to, she could have said, help me to understand like what what you were thinking. Um, help me to understand what you were thinking. That's open ended. Instead of saying, why did you do that? That's specific. Help me to understand what's going on in your world, um, in picking that rug. That offers up a bigger conversation, and that gives him space to really articulate himself, as opposed to just, why'd you pick that? Oh, are you being cheap? You know what I mean? Just asking open-ended questions. So that's one. Um, the son, what's the example you gave me? The son is upset at
Uh,
school.
he's upset.
Yeah.
Bullying is such a huge thing, and I feel like a lot of parents um, aren't equipped to talk to their kids about being bullied, and a lot of kids don't really open up about it. And so, like, if you're a parent, you suspect that something is wrong. How do you get them to open up in a way that they're not defensive?
Um, I definitely, I tell parents, like you got to do it in stages and phases. Like more importantly, allowing them to know that you're there. And I often tell parents, we got to stop pretending like as parents that we had it all together or that we're perfect, because that can kind of be the way it comes off the kids, like they can't relate. And I always say transparent leaders create environments for sharing. So I always encourage the parents to be transparent about some things in their life, and that'll create an environment where the kids will want to share. So you exhibit the vulnerability first, then they'll model it. And so what you want from them, you have to be that. And so I guess to answer that question specifically, I would say, being transparent. Like my sister with my nephew, he shares with her because my sister is very vulnerable with him. He's 7, but he understands enough. When my sister explained to him, like, your father's not in your life, and yes, it hurts. I would like for us, I would have liked for you to have a father, and I apologize. In her doing that often, he's not afraid to come to her with things.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I think I kind of grew up where my mom overshared too much about what was going on. What's the can you give us the because I could tell you relate. Can you give us the difference between sharing and oversharing? Like my mom was like, yeah, the bills are due on the 31st, and we 2 paycheck. Like I don't need to know. I'm 9 years
But
old.
no, yeah, you don't need to know that.
I don't need
but
to know that.
You don't need to know that specifically, but you can say, hey, we've encountered some rough times where we're trying to work through this. Things may be a little tight coming up. Things may be happening. It's still being transparent, but it's not oversharing.
I love that. Perfect. And then you talked about time to process. I want to really highlight this area because we know we're talking about men take longer, but in general, there's some women. I mean, some people take longer to process because, first of
Absolutely.
all, on a physiological level, our limbic system is much more developed than our prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part, right? Can you talk about that and tell people why it takes longer?
Well, also, because really people don't become adults until they're like 30, because the frontal lobe isn't fully developed till around that time, 29, 30. And then also too, we didn't learn how to engage in delayed gratification. So, sometimes you just want to cut somebody out, and you didn't learn. You didn't learn like, oh, I don't need to cuss them out. Let me just choose a different way of doing that. I think that reasoning and things like that doesn't really come into play for a while. And especially, what I think with a lot of men, in terms of like just delayed in processing, a lot of times we never had the opportunity to actually process something. No one has ever given us the space to do so. And so this is a new frontier for us, for a lot of men, being able to say like, okay, I want to talk to you about this. Can we talk about this in a week? That's scary for a lot of men because they've never had to do it before. So it's like it's like treading on new territory, but it's a thing that I know for a fact that it's helped a lot of relationships that I've coached. A lot of marriages have been restored because the woman wasn't understanding that her husband needs time to process and that this is new for him, and she had to be patient with him. And so yeah, I mean, we definitely need time to process. Even as educated as I am and as advanced, air quotation marks, as I am, I still need time to process.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is it comes off as we don't care because we're not
Yeah.
emotionally, expressive.
Well, and I also think that you got to also understand that men, by and large, are comfortable in two emotions: anger and indifference, right? And really, beneath the anger is hurt, and beneath the hurt is disappointment, and beneath the disappointment is an expectation that wasn't met. So a lot of times, men don't even know that. They don't even know that they're upset because the expectation wasn't met in their life. And so you have to think, when you've never really been emotionally mature, you're still that same age emotionally. So if you've never matured emotionally as an adult, you're still a child in the area of your life. You understand? So like if something happened to you traumatic when you were 5 years old, you still think about that and a lot of things from the perspective of a 5-year-old.
All right. Okay.
So
All
you
right.
could be,
So I not to cut. I
yeah,
want to get specific. My brain is going in 10 different directions right now. All
yeah.
right. First of all, can you break down that emotional hierarchy again? You said anger, and then what?
Oh, yeah. So anger is the secondary emotion. It's not the primary emotion when we're angry. The primary emotion that we're experiencing is hurt.
Okay.
And then underneath the hurt is disappointment. And underneath the disappointment is an expectation that wasn't met.
Okay. So can you apply that to the Black Lives Matter movement right now, the anger that Black men are feeling, and click through what we're angry about, what we're hurt about, the disappointment? I'm putting you on the spot, but I
Yeah.
just, if we can click through each one and how that shows up and link that.
Well, the anger is for the obvious. It's like, the anger is like, y'all been doing this for so long. Now we pissed off about it. Like, we've been pissed off, but now we're really pissed off. And the hurt comes from is that you would think after all these years that this stuff would not continue to be happening. And the disappointment is like looking at this country like, I thought we would have evolved. We would have evolved by now. We would have, Dr. King and all these people, they had these movements, these marches, and slavery was abolished. And the expectation was is that we had an expectation that you were going to treat us as equals. We had an expectation that we would be respected as human beings.
Wow. All right. So I'd be remiss because, and I'm gonna put you on the spot for one more. If you
Go
could break
ahead,
that down,
brother.
because that was wonderfully said. Because there's married couples out there, and infidelity is huge and is breaking up a lot of people. But I don't even want to talk about infidelity. Betrayal, I feel like is the bigger thing.
Is the root of
Is the root
infidelity.
of
Yeah.
infidelity, and so someone gets angry when they feel betrayed. So can you click through? We could use infidelity as the betrayal, the emotions for somebody who has experienced infidelity.
Well, betrayal is like a gaping wound, right? It's like a blow to the stomach. And I think underneath all of that, the disappointment is the anger is that I'm angry that I'm in a situation where I've been cheated on, right? And then I'm hurt that this person that I love would do this to me, right? And then the disappointment is that I thought that our marriage was enough, or that I was enough. I'm disappointed in who you are as a person. I'm disappointed because I had an expectation that you would honor this relationship.
And then what's the unmet? The expectations that you would honor this relationship. Wow,
Yeah.
man, that is whoo. And then I was thinking about when we talk about that example that I gave earlier about the woman who was angry or had brought up like, why are Black men crying, and
Mm-hmm.
thought they were strong. I realized on the other side of her anger is like fear or an unmet expectation, and what
And also
is it?
too, what her relationship is, and also too, what her relationship is with what she thinks being strong is. You said she was Russian.
Mm,
That culture is very not emotionally driven. They're very much poker face. And you
yeah,
suck it up and keep it moving as well.
yeah.
So you also have to understand that excuse me, that's her world as well.
So, so how do you communicate with somebody who's coming from I mean, from a culture where emotions aren't even, it's not even a thing. Like it's nowhere. It's not in movies. It's not in the household.
Yeah.
It's nowhere. Uh, is that where painting the pictures and
Yeah, that's
right,
where sensory language comes in,
right,
and that's
got
where
you.
empathy comes in. You know, empathy. You may not, do you know what being betrayed feels like? Do you know what pain feels like? I'm sure she has those. Even though she may not display them, she knows what it feels like inwardly. And just appealing to that place and finding that touch point and finding that connection within that space.
Man, we covered so much, brother. Is there anything from your book, the Survival Handbook, that we haven't talked about? Anything from your experiences that you think would be beneficial for the listeners out there, especially the men who are struggling with mental health issues or suicidality?
Um, I think we covered a lot of it. I guess the thing that I want men to know is that you have the right to be human, you have the right to be whole, and you have the right to thrive. And what I mean by whole is not a life of perfection, but meaning that the things that once mastered you, you now know how to master them. And that's my definition of being whole.
Wow. Thank you, brother. And then I ask this question of everybody who does the podcast, because I always imagine there's one person out there who may be on the precipice of ending their life.
Mhm.
Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them?
I would say to them that there is another side to this, that the overwhelming emotion that you're experiencing right now will subside. There's another side to this. And if you could just hold on for one more day, you may be surprised at what awaits you.
Brother, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This is amazing. Plug all your things. Where can people get the book? Where can people work with you?
Yes. Survival Mode, you can get my book Survival Mode off survivalmode.com or amazon.com. And you can follow me at Purvis Taylor on Instagram and Purvis Taylor on Twitter and Purvis Taylor on Facebook.
Thank you, Purvis Taylor. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you going to see a coach or a therapist. Calling the 1-800-SUICIDE number. It's you, but you have to take that first step. You have to ask for help. It could save your life, literally. You go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Go to survivalmode.com to get the book, to work with, God damn it, my Purvis Taylor. I want to say Parvis. I was like, it's not Parvis, it's Purvis. Purvis Taylor. And let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Purvis.
I appreciate you, brother.